record. All right, so sorry to miss the first part, but we're going over the NBCC course outline. So with the professional practice, there's 12%. You can see intake and assessments, 12%. Areas of clinical focus are 29%. So those are things like, how do you handle grief? How do you handle addiction? How do you handle depression? What do you do if somebody comes in with anxiety? So it's really looking at what are some of the things that clients would bring to your practice that you would need to know how to deal with. Counseling or treatment planning speaks for itself. That's creating treatment plans, like client presents with this, this, and this. What would be an appropriate, theory to use? What would be an appropriate strategy to use? What are some common concerns for, attrition? Counseling skills and interventions. This is, the actual skills, like your basic attending skills, your advanced attending skills, things like that. And then counseling or core counseling attributes, the things about us. So multiculturalism, cultural humility, being maybe self-disclosure, countertransference, those would be the types of things you would find in that section. Now, it gives you a list of each one of these things. It tells you exactly what's going to be on the test in the sense of the topic areas. And so like our study guide, we actually use these as the heading. So we have information about each one of these areas. So this is what you should be studying. All right, all of this. You can see, look at this clinical. That one was such a huge chapter. Look how long, it's forever. And then treatment planning, counseling skills, and such. Now I put this outline in the it's in the Dropbox, but I'm also going to drop the actual direct link in the chat for you. So if you want to take a peek at it, there it is. Okay. And it is a really helpful tool to help you get ready for the test. Any questions? All right. And let's jump right in. Okay. The first thing we're going to do is quizzes. So we're going to get started here. I'm going to give you a code, a link to join when it gives itself a second to get up. There we go. So you go to joinmyquiz.com. You can do this one on your computer. So join my quiz, or on your phone even. Joinmyquiz.com, and here's the game code, 112 and 705. Okay. So I'll put it in the chat. If you use that link in the chat, I think it takes you directly in. Yay, Celeste, first one in. Good job. So what we're going to be doing here is we're going to be looking at some old NCE questions. And these are retired questions, but they will give you an idea of how to break down things. And all right, I think we have almost everybody. Let's get a few more in there. Okay. All right. So I want to teach you a process on how to break down questions. Okay. So unfortunately, I don't have a slide for this, which I should have added one, but I forgot to. We're going to use something called CARES, and I'm trying to find it so I can describe it to you, make sure I don't misdescribe it. Okay, so CARES. So CARES. This is going to be your way of remembering how to look at each question. All right, so CARES. Carefully review the prompt and identify the key words. So we're going to practice doing that here. That's the first step. Anytime you get a question, that's the first thing I want you to do, is I want you to try to identify what are the key words that are going to give you a clue to what the answer is that they're seeking. On the NCE, there's usually 2 right answers and 2 not so right answers. All right, which makes it a little bit challenging, right? Because if you have 2 right answers, how do you know which one? There's going to be a word or 2 in the prompt that's going to key you in to which one you should use. So carefully review the prompt and the keywords. 2, answer the prompt in your head before you look at the answers. Okay, so if you have to, cover it up, right? So read the prompt and then think about, okay, if I were answering this question, what comes to mind immediately? Because most of the time you're probably going to find something on the answer, you know, in the answers that matches what you thought in your head, right? So that's a good way to do it. So C is carefully review the prompt and identify the key words. A is answer it in your head without looking at the responses. R is then review the answer choices. Then you'll review those choices. E is going to be eliminate the wrong ones, right? Eliminate the ones that don't make sense and don't work. And then S is select a choice. And here's the most important part, stick with it. You are very much likely to choose the right answer the first time. When you start overthinking it and thinking about it too much, you're going to get yourself worked up and you're going to end up choosing the wrong answer. Okay, we see that all the time. They actually track people who click on one answer and then click on another answer, and more than not, that second answer is wrong. So they actually track those statistics. So trust yourself, trust your instinct. Your first answer is probably right. It's more likely right than wrong. Unless you see something later in the test and you're like, oh my gosh, that was totally wrong, right? And you have a definitive reason for going back and changing, then that's different. Just remember, you have access to the first half of the test and access to the second half. After break, you don't have access to the first half. Okay, so make sure you're happy with all those answers. All right, any questions about CARES? Does that make sense, the process? All right.
Well, what did the A and the R stand for again?
Yeah, so I'll go through it again. So C is carefully review and identify keywords. A is answer the prompt in your head without looking at the answers. R is then review the existing answer choices. E is eliminate the bad choices or wrong choices, and S is select a choice and stick with it. Okay, we good? Awesome. All right, let's get started here. So thank you. Okay. It wants to give me this little tutorial before we get started. Not as if I haven't done it before. There we go. Okay. Forgot about the music. I hate the music. The ticking clock would just drive me crazy. All right, so let's take a look at this one. So behavioral, oh, it always does that. Go back. There we go. A behavioral counselor is working with a client who complains of anxiety. The counselor and the client examine the antecedents and the consequences of the anxiety. The counselor decides to eliminate any unwanted behavior through extinction by. Throw up in the chat or say out loud, what are some of our keywords here? What are the keywords that give us some clue as to what we're looking for? Yes, good job, Celeste. What else? Yes, good job, Richard. Right, Jasmine. Yep. So we've got behavioral, antecedents, consequences, extinction, unwanted behavior, right? Anxiety. Yeah, that's a good one too, Jay. So these are the key words. So when I see those words as a counselor, the first thing I think of is behavioral counseling, right? That comes to mind is behavioral therapy. So antecedents and consequences of behavioral, adverse counter conditioning. Well, that's not going to do as much. Thought stopping, cognitive, punishment, unethical, ta-da, implosion or flooding, right? Because these are behavioral techniques. So these are behavioral techniques, right? So these are what I'm going to be looking for. Does that make sense how I broke it down? Okay. So what are my keywords? What am I looking for in the answer? I'm looking for a behavioral technique. I see implosion and flooding. They're behavioral, so I choose them.
I have a question.
Mhm.
Is there a way to
like make the time longer, or it might
Now,
just,
let me
it felt a little bit
see.
quick to me.
How about that? I'll try to remember to disable the timer. Okay,
Thank you.
you're welcome. And we'll try to get at least 75% responses before we go to the next one. So. All right, we have almost everybody, so a few more. Let's go to the next. All right, so on a college campus, we have a group of minority students. They've been protesting the treatment of harassing comments. 11 of the students come to the counseling center. They want a group experience to arrive at some answers, find solutions. What is the most appropriate theoretical orientation? So when I read this, a couple of things that stand out to me, right? They are believing there's some discrimination. They want a group experience. They want to arrive at some answers and find solutions, right? So that want to find solutions and answers is what really stands out to me. Psychoanalytic is going to be unconscious motivations. They're not looking for understanding the psychological motivations, right? Gestalt is about energy blocks. That's not what discrimination is. Client-centered, it's about congruence. You're not going to find congruence in that environment, right? If you're being discriminated against, there's no chance you're going to find that congruence, really. So what I'm thinking is behavioral, right? They're looking for a change in behavior. They're looking for solutions. They're looking for answers, right? And that involves changes in behavior. So that's how I came to the solution of behavioral. Okay, so again, keywords are the key. Let's do the next one. And I'll turn the timer off once we get there. Boop. All right, we're almost there. So we're going to go ahead and end the question. So yeah. All right. So an employment counselor uses the general aptitude test battery, which measures aptitudes important for different jobs. Typically, his clients are uneducated, and therefore the client is concerned about how his client scores will stack up against others and how they would perceive their aptitudes, right? The sense of self-judgment. And he interprets the score of each of his clients how. So the GATB is an individual test, right? So it's a test of your individual ability. So that stands out to me. It also talks about being concerned about how they stack up. So I'm not going to want something that's going to compare my client to somebody else, right? So something like a standardized test, like the WISC or something like that, because they're going to be comparing themselves. Like I only scored at the 40th percentile or something like that. So that's what kind of stands out to me. So therefore, I am going to, it's not going to tell us, look at something that doesn't have the national norms. And I'm just trying to see, let me see. Can't remember what all, I know what it was. So all of the ones that talked about norms, we're not going to use those, right? None of those are going to matter. They're going to be helpful to us. So what we're going to look for is, so I'm going to rule out local norms. I'm going to rule out national norms. I'm going to rule out something in relation to other tests. That leaves me with ipsatively. Now, even if you didn't know what that word meant, you could have probably figured that out because the others are all comparisons, right? Ipsatively means within oneself. So it's looking at the scores compared to, like, you're looking at how's your math score for yourself compared to your reading score. How does your technical ability or your ability to screw on nuts and bolts, how does that compare with your spatial awareness, right? Because then you can choose a job that fits you better, right? If you know what your aptitudes are, you can match it to a job. So ipsatively, within oneself. Let's do the next one. Okay. So individuals come to counseling for a variety of reasons. An immediate goal for many clients might be what? And there's one big word there, very important word in that prompt. All right, so when I'm looking at this, what do y'all think is the most important word in this one? Throw it up in the chat or say it out loud. What comes to mind for y'all? What do y'all think? Yes, 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 yes. You nailed it. Yeah, we're seeing a lot of it in the chat. Immediate, right? Immediate is the most important word. So it's the first thing that clients want to achieve, right? So when I look at self-understanding, that's not going to happen immediately, right? When I look at skill development, not going to happen immediately. Self-disclosure, yeah, that's what usually happens in intakes in the first few appointments, right? Is they just want to dump, they want to give the information. Employment, probably not going to happen if that's what they need in the first appointment, right? So I would choose self-disclosure for that reason. So that's, again, keywords are so, so important. All right, next one. This is everybody's favorite questions, right? When they ask you what type of analysis or research to use. And so we're going to figure out some keywords to help us choose those. All right, almost everybody has gone into this one, so let's take a look at this one. All right. Oh, this is slid down. All right, I have to tell you what the rest of it is. That's interesting because on my other screen it's not showing that. All right, so keywords here. Counselor educator, let's see. They're looking at relationship and self-esteem problems. They've got a wait list. They want to know if men and women, so gender, gain self-esteem differently when they were seen in individual counseling, group counseling, and psychoeducation counseling. There's a possibility of an interaction between gender and the kind of service being individual counseling, group counseling, and small education class. The appropriate statistical technique to use is or was. All right, so think about this as two variables that I'm looking at: gender, male and female in this case, very limited, and then the type of service they got. So imagine in your head a chart, right? A chart, and you've got gender down one column, and then you have the groups over here. So you have individual, group, and small psychoeducation. And what you're looking at here is how did the men in the individual counseling do as compared to the men in the group counseling, as compared to the men in the psychoeducation, as compared to the female in the individual, female in the group, female in the small psychoeducation. So you've got 6 groups here. You've got the men in each one of those types, and you have the females in each one of those types. And you can compare within the gender, between the types of treatment. So you're looking at all these wonderful resources. When I'm thinking about statistics and figuring out the right statistical analysis, the first thing I need to ask myself is, what are my independent variables and what are my dependent variables? My independent variables are the things that I'm using to differentiate people, or the things I'm doing to people, the treatment. So in this particular case, we've got 2 independent variables. I'm differentiating my clients or my participants on gender, right? That's one of my variables, gender, male, female. The other independent variable is the type of service that they're getting, individual, group, or small education. So I have 2 independent variables. Now, I can use a t-test, T for 2. All right, T for 2. If I have 2 scores, in this case, I have 6 scores. I have the men in each of the 3 groups, and I have the women in each of the 3 groups, right? So there's 6 things that I'm comparing here. So a t-test won't do it. Gone, bye-bye t-test, because that's too much, right? It won't do it. The key here is interaction. That is really the most important word in this whole thing. And the fact that I have 2 independent variables and 1 dependent variable, the dependent variable being self-esteem, relationships and self-esteem here. Okay. So in this particular case, because I have 3 groups, the types of treatment that I am comparing across 2 parts of gender, I'm going to use a factorial ANOVA. So a factorial ANOVA is always going to be 2 or more independent variables, 1 dependent variable across 3 or more groups. Okay, so if you've got 3 groups, you need to start thinking ANOVA if you're looking at differences. If it's 3 groups, ANOVAs. Sarah, did you have a question?
Is there a way we can see the answers just listed plain again?
So a one-way analysis of variance is going to be 1 independent variable, 1 dependent variable across 3 or more groups. Okay. Factorial analysis is the answer because I have 2 independent variables, 1 dependent variable, and I'm looking at the interaction. A t-test won't work because I have 6 different scores that I'm comparing. I can only compare 2 things, either 2 groups or 2 scores with a t-test, because T is for 2. A multivariate analysis is going to be if I have 1 or more independent variables, 2 or more dependent variables. Okay, so the multivariate is going to be when you have 2 dependent. And in this case, we're only looking at self-esteem. So it's 1 dependent variable. Okay. And I think there's another slide that will help with that. Yes, see, dependent variable is the outcome, independent variable is the condition of the study. So let's do this one together. I want you to tell me what the independent variable is in the first one. The rolling stone gathers no moss. So what do you think the independent variable is? You can say it out loud, you can put it in the chat. Yeah, Eliza and Sarah, you got it. Okay. All right. So it is the rolling, right? The action of rolling is the condition that we're giving, right? That's the condition of the study. So what's the dependent variable? What's the outcome? Yep. Right. I know. Yeah. So the moss. Now, sometimes people say no moss, but it's not no moss. It's actually moss, right? It's the amount of moss that the person has that is the dependent variable. So think about it as what is the outcome? The rock's going to either have moss or not have moss, right? There's going to be some level of moss or not mossed. All right, let's do the second one. Birds of a feather flock together. What is the dependent variable this time? The dependent, the outcome. I have some future researchers in here. This is awesome. Great. Okay. So flocking. Yeah. So how they flock is the outcome. So what is the independent variable? What's causing the flocking or leading to the flocking? What do y'all think? Yeah. Be specific. I like some of you saying the feather, right? So the feather is the independent variable. It's what causes them to flock together. So good job. All right. And that's important to know. If you can identify those independent and dependent variables, then you can begin to understand how to choose the analysis. Go ahead, Melody.
Thanks, Dr. L.A. This is really helpful. I put this in the chat, but I wanted to check in with you. I know we're just a little bit into our review session today, but so far the questions you've shared feel very different than anything I've encountered in the Purple Book or in the study app, which makes me feel a little bit anxious, especially in light of what you said at the beginning, where I guess maybe the test is organized differently. Are the questions you're posting today like, is it normal that I'm finding there's a difference?
So people who go through my study material say that the test is a little easier than my material. So they do really well. I have a very high pass rate. And I think that's part of it is teaching you how to break down these questions so that once you get to the test, you're going to be like, this is easy. That's what I'm hoping for. Okay. All right. So it's more about focus more on the strategies I'm teaching you than the content will come, but it's more about the strategy. Okay. All right. So this is my cheat sheet for stats. Okay. Anytime you're asked what type of analysis you should use or anything like that, this should help you. If you have 2 scores, like I had my participants take a depression scale and then they took it after I did something with them, it's going to be a dependent t-test. Because I have to pair their pre and their post, right? So I have to match them. If Amber takes a test, I have to give Amber's pre-test with Amber's post-test. I can't take Amber's pre-test and match it to Jasmine's post-test. That wouldn't work, okay? So if I have 2 scores across 2 groups, like Annabelle and I did a stats session yesterday, and we looked at 2 juries that made different decisions about sentencing, okay? Well, people couldn't serve on both juries. They were separate from each other. They were mutually exclusive. So in that case, it was an independent t-test. If I have 3 groups like we just had, where I had individual, group, and psychoeducation, and you can't be in all 3 of those, you can only be in one. And if I had one IV, I was only looking at treatment, it would have been an ANOVA. But in this group situation we were just looking at, we were looking at the treatment and gender. So we had 2 independent variables across 3 groups. So that made it the factorial ANOVA. And when you see the word interaction, immediately think factorial ANOVA. That's a key word for factorial ANOVA. If you have 3 groups, you can have 1 IV actually, and more than 1 DV, then you can have a MANOVA. So that's actually not correct. So let's correct that. So this should be 1 greater than or equal to 1 IV, and this should be greater than or equal to 2 DVs. I apologize for that. I never noticed that. All right, if it says you're looking for a relationship, you need to think correlation. Relationship is correlation. Prediction is regression. So those are your keywords for stats. Anytime they ask you about a research study or statistics, if you can remember this chart and this one corrected, right? Greater than or equal to 1 IV, greater than or equal to 2 DVs, then you're going to be good to go. This will give you a lot of the keywords. I like to say here, I just summarized a semester of statistics in 1 slide. Okay.
the correction one more time?
Sure, happy to. So on this one, it should be, here, I'm gonna actually just write it. Well, let me do that. So it should look like this. So it should be greater than, oh. Ah. It's too early in the morning. 3 groups. So it should look like that. Okay.
For the last two, sorry, I was like kind of taking some notes. What did you say for the last 2 points on that side? The relationship and
Oh, yeah. So relationship is equal to correlation and prediction equals regression. Okay. So if I'm looking for a relationship between variables, I'm going to try to find a correlation. If I'm looking for a prediction, I'm going to look for something that says regression. Okay. Go ahead, Richard.
Yeah, just what came up for me is just kind of a little cheat, but I'm not sure if it is accurate or not. Is so for the dependent t-test and the independent t-test, would they ever have multiple dependent variables?
No, they can't because you can
Because
only
they're
compare 2
have
scores.
two
right?
things.
Yeah.
So basically, if we look for the dependent variable first and we ever get more than one, then we just know it's MANOVA, whatever else
You're
is
looking
out
for
there.
differences. Yeah.
Yeah.
You
Okay.
can have more than one dependent variable in some of the more advanced, but I don't think they would have that on this test.
Awesome.
Yeah. So
Thank
these
you.
are the ones that are usually on this test.
Great.
Good question. Something else. Oh, the other thing is a dependent t-test is also called a paired t-test, just so you know that. So when you see dependent as paired, think about it. Pre-test, post-test, you're pairing them, right? You're connecting them. So paired t-test is the same as a dependent. All right, let's go look at some validity. I promise they're all not stats. We'll get out of stats eventually. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at this one. So the key here is that I have a correlation coefficient. So that's a lower R equals 0.70. What I know is that if I square my correlation coefficient, I get variance. Okay, so that's the relationship between those two things. Correlation coefficient squared equals variance. Trying to get to the, there we go. There we go. So important things to remember. Correlation is not causation. That's so important, right? So if I say hours of study is correlated with the final grade you get, well, the final grade is also correlated with the hours you study. It's a mutual relationship there, right? So it's not causation. So correlation coefficient squared equals the coefficient of determination and variance. So 0.7 squared equals 49%. So it would have been, the answer would have been less than 50%. The first one. Okay, less than 50%. So just remember, correlation coefficient, square it, I get my variance. Okay, next one. We're moving into some professional orientation here. And it skipped one. Let's go back. Well, it gave us the answer already, so let's just talk about it. All right, I'm going to go ahead and I don't know why that was going there. We'll just talk about it here. All right, so accreditation of counseling training programs requires that counseling theories are taught and followed by a developmental process. A key component of accreditation is the evaluation. What body accredits counselor education programs? Hopefully most of you can get this one, because all of you, I think, are coming from programs that are accredited this way. So AAMFT accredits marriage and family programs. American Psychological Association accredits psychological programs. The North Central Association is a regional accreditor, which they're all now national accreditors, but they accredit like SACS. For most of us are accredited by SACS. And so counseling programs are accredited by the Council for the Accreditation of Counseling Related Education Programs. SACES, SACS and North Central, all of these, they accredit the school as a whole, like the whole university, whereas these three programs certify a program, so like a graduate program. So that's the difference between these. Okay, so always remember K-CREP. There's almost always a question on there about K-CREP.
Here's what I found.
Oh, stop. Siri is getting involved. Okay. So we have a client that's got some has some painful material they want to discuss. The counselor decides to use a thematic apperception test. Where is that counselor practicing from? If I'm using a thematic apperception test, what theoretical orientation am I most likely coming from? They love questions about theory. That's one of the biggest parts of the test. All right. So whenever I see story or vignette and then apperception, which is like your perception, I'm going to be ruling out cognitions because it's about perceptions, not cognition. So mark that one out, right? I don't see anything about energy blocks. Going to mark that one out and being in the present. I'm not seeing anything about congruence, unconditional positive regard, anything like that. Marking that one out, right? Which leaves me with psychoanalytic, which is about perceptions and unconsciousness and things like that. So that's where that one would be. Next one is a long one. So middle school principal is curious whether different math teaching techniques result in different and better math learning. She has 3 classrooms of 4th grade math students and assigns different math teaching techniques to the 3 teachers to use. All the students completed the same math exam in September as the pretest and will post-test in May. Upon examining the math pretest scores, principal finds the class mean math score 72 for classroom A. For classroom B, it's 88. From classroom C, it's 73. In May, after the post-test data is collected, the appropriate statistical procedure for the principal to apply first is what? So in this one, the key is that they have different pretest scores. That's what stands out to me at most. So think about it as a track race, right? So classroom A is starting a little bit behind classroom C, and classroom B is way ahead of both of them, right? And so I've got to do something to account for that pre-existing difference. All right, so whenever I see a pre-existing difference and I'm trying to account or compare the groups, I'm going to think covariant. That's the first thing that's going to pop in my head is covariant. So if you see a pre-existing difference, think covariant. And so that's going to be an ANCOVA. It's not multiple regression because I'm not trying to predict something. I'm comparing. It's not a one-way ANOVA because I can't compare things that are already different without accounting for the difference and really understand it. I can't do t-test because it's more than 2, right? I've got 3 groups. So that leaves me with ANCOVA, with the covariant. So if I see a pre-existing difference and I'm trying to compare it, think covariant. I don't know why some of these have slid down. Okay.
I have a question,
Oh,
Dr.
yeah.
Stretch. With your study guide and the new book, which is exciting, congratulations.
Thank you.
Does that include a deeper dive into the definitions or explanations of these specific types of things, like an ANCOVA and all that, or is it just focused more on the strategy and?
No. So you get both parts of it, right? So there's 3 chapters that talk about how to take the test, what to do, whether you're taking the CPE or the NCE. And then there's chapters for each of the work domains that are anywhere from 70 to 150 pages each. They're so long and really goes into detail. So like for the research part, for example, I created tables and charts so that you know if I'm trying to do this, this is the type of research analysis I use. If I'm trying to analyze, this is what I use, right? So it gives you like these guides, but then there's like I said, 750 practice questions, and each of the practice questions has a detailed explanation for why the answers that are wrong and why the answers that are right are right. Yeah.
Okay.
I was never so tired of writing questions than after that 750 hours. I actually finished the book, the first draft, at like 4 a.m. on my birthday. So that's how, like, I was so happy to get rid of that thing. It's done.
Okay,
All
thank
right.
you.
You're welcome. So Jamie is a 16-year-old sophomore, developed a pattern of skipping classes. His homework is seldom completed. And when it is, it doesn't represent his ability. Sounds like my 15-year-old. Parents have begun to look for an appropriate counselor for him. Jamie might be best helped with a counselor using which theoretical concept from, or using theoretical concepts from what type of theories? And they give you 2. Right? So 2 theories. So you have to really examine both of the theories and decide, okay, what is going to be the best combination here for this particular individual? Okay. So we got a pretty good number here. So let's go out and let's take a look at what we have here. All right, there we go. So if you look at the answers, so the first one was behavioral and existential. Well, behavioral changes might be one. Yeah, totally. But is a 16-year-old probably going to be thinking about their existence and what life means to them and the meaning of life? I've had 1 or 2 over the years. Trust me, it's interesting. But most teenagers are not thinking about tomorrow. They're in the moment. They're thinking about right now, here and now. So I'm going to rule that one out because I don't see too many existential teens. All right. The second one is, let's look at person-centered and rational emotive. Person-centered is congruence with ideal self and perceived self. Again, 16-year-olds, some can do it, but most of the time they're not there developmentally yet, right? To understand what their perceived self, they just know their self. They don't know that there's this idea of perceived self and ideal self. They can't always think about that in the way. They don't always have full metacognition yet. So I'm going to rule that one out because they're not really looking. Jamie's probably pretty happy with Jamie. Jamie doesn't care, right? So Jamie's ideal self and perceived self are going to be like, well, whatever. All right. And then I'm going to look at behavioral and person-centered. Again, I'm going to rule it out because of the person-centered. So that leaves me with Gestalt and with reality. Okay. Gestalt is what's blocking you, what's preventing you from meeting your potential. That sounds like something that might be helpful, right? And then reality therapy is very, let's get something done, right? Let's get some actions. Let's get some, figure out what the blocks are, what you need to do, how you can get through those obstacles. So that's why I would choose Gestalt and reality therapy. Okay. Well, welcome, Alexa. We're so happy to have you. And I am recording this, so you can always catch up. All right, so let's go to the next one. Oh, it skipped one. There we go. All right, so a treatment center for delinquent girls. One of Carmen's client expresses considerable rage towards the probation officer for putting her in this place. The girl has a plan to harm the probation officer when she gets the opportunity. Carmen believes she is justified in breaking confidence and warning the probation officer because of the what? What is going to allow her to break confidentiality? Something that's very important to think about when you're taking the NCE, you need to forget about your state laws. Okay? You need to focus on what is the national norm, no matter what state you're in, because this is a national test. So your state may have different rules, but this isn't a state test. For those of you in North Carolina, when you take the jurisprudence exam, this question would be answered differently. Okay? Because this is not the rule in North Carolina. This is the rule nationally. All right, so let's take a look at it. Okay, so duty to warn refers to the counselor's obligation to warn the identifiable victims. I see students use duty to warn and duty to protect interchangeably, and they actually mean different things. Duty to warn means I'm going to tell Richard that Sarah's going to beat him up, right? I'm going to tell him, right? Whereas duty to protect, I'm going to call the police and try to protect Sarah. Different. Okay, so duty to protect, I'm going to try to get others involved to protect you. Duty to warn, I'm going to tell the victim directly. All right, when you're taking this national exam, you need to think terrorist off, straight up terrorist off. But for those in North Carolina, I have to stress that is not the law in North Carolina. It's Gregory and Kilbride, which is a different law. So when you take your jurisprudence exam, when you're asked about duty to warn, it's Gregory and Kilbride. We have the ability to duty to warn. We have the ability to warn, but we're not fully legally protected in North Carolina to warn. And that is a little catch for us in North Carolina. Okay, so know the difference. Think about the test you're taking and what framework that test is coming from, right? If it's a national test, you need to think nationally. If it's a state test, you think about the state laws specifically. Okay, any questions about that?
So the jurisprudence exam is state specific rather than national.
Yes, it's state specific, and you can thank me for that because I was the one that wrote the law that put it in an act. And the reason that we implemented the jurisprudence exam was because we had so many people coming to the board. I used to be the chair of the board many years ago, and we had so many complaints against people who simply did not know the state laws. And so that's why we all now in North Carolina have to take the jurisprudence exam every single time we get our license so that you can make sure that you're up to date and that you'll, stay out of the board's hearing queue. Okay. So it's there to protect you as a practitioner so you stay current. It also gives you 5 credits of ethics, which is awesome because then you can check off your ethics requirement. All right. But remember, NCE is a national test. They tear us off. And I got this website right here. This website is really great because let me actually try to grab it, see if it'll let me do it. Is it gonna let me grab it? Nope, it's not gonna let me grab it. So let's see. Duty to warn and protect. This is it right here. Is this one? No, it's not that one. There is the site. Go ahead, Sarah. Ask you a question. This is it.
Oh, no, when you finish your thought.
So this is one of my favorite sites. This is the link in there. I can put it in the chat so you guys can grab it. This will be very good for you, like long term, especially if you're going across states or working in different states. I was a military wife, so it was very important for me to know how to move across different state lines, right? And this gives you a map, and they keep this very current. And if you decide to move to Virginia, okay, duty to warn is mandatory. Whereas in North Carolina, there's no duty to warn and protect under Kilbride, right? We can, but we can also get in trouble for it. So, and then it goes down here and it gives you the specific law that's connected to it. which is a wonderful, wonderful resource to have. Sarah, go ahead.
So this is a general test question. Like Alexa said in the comments, like mandatory disclosure rule, that sounded kind of general. And so I was like, oh, I'll pick that. Is it better on this test to choose something like specific?
Now, I will
Okay.
say this, these questions have been retired by NBCC, and they've made some improvements on how they ask the question. So a couple things to know. You will always have a question. So in some of the old test banks, and even in the purple book, I think you can still see some that are like fill in the blank, right? Or accept or never questions. Those no longer exist on the NCE. They're completely gone. Or the ones where it says which of the following, and you have to choose A and B or C and D, or none of those questions are gone. You will always have a question and you will choose one of the answers. So that they've made some significant improvements there. So that will be helpful to you to know. The other thing is, if that question were appearing on the NCE now, you would have 4 laws or 4 court cases. So you would have to choose a court case. So it wouldn't be anything like that to distinguish. You wouldn't see something general like that. You'd see the Buckley Amendment, FERPA, ADA, and Tarasoff, right? You would see something like that, where you would see specific laws of all the same thing. Okay. All right. Okay. And for those of you in North Carolina, you can grab this. That's the Gregory and Kilbride you'll need for the jurisprudence. The cool thing about the jurisprudence is they give you every resource you need to pass that test. It's open book. So it's not hard. All right. So we're going to look at this one. A personnel director of a medium-sized manufacturer is instructed to increase the percentage of hires you could successfully perform the delicate and complex jobs requiring finger dexterity. The personnel director was reluctant to add another test because the process was already extensive. In reviewing possible tests to use with employee selection, the personnel director was most concerned, see I'm highlighting, underlining, most concerned with what? So I need to add something to this process. What am I most concerned with at this point? And Mara, thank you for adding the site. I was just about to do that for Alexa. So this one trips people up a lot because they have been told throughout their undergrad and graduate that the type of response is not something that's real. So I'm going to explain what I mean here in a second. I was trying to find my notes for this one. So there it is. All right. So one of the things to note is that standard error of measurement, right? That's that's the error that you get in your response. So you look at that when you're choosing tests to see, okay, how wide is this error on this test? But that's not the thing he's most concerned about. He's not really concerned about how good the test is, right? Right now, he's worried about the fact that there's so much already in this process. And he wants to think about, okay, if I add something, it needs to really look like it's important and that it's valuable and it makes sense that it was added. And that is face validity. And a lot of you probably have been told over the time that face validity is not a real validity. And so I think students discount validity, but face validity is super important. If I tell a client, hey, next time you come in, I want to give you a screening to see how your depression's doing. And the client's like, okay, great, happy to do that, no problem, right? And I hand them a quiz on how to change their car tire, they're going to be a little confused. Right? So face validity is really, to me, one of the most important validities. It's not a mathematical validity, but it is a perception validity. And if a person doesn't believe something looks like it should be in there, right? They're not going to take it seriously. If you're taking this test and you get a question that says, what is your favorite color? Are you going to take that question seriously? Probably not. You won't see that question, sorry. So it has to have face validity in order to be valued, right? So that's what we're most concerned about in this particular scenario, is that it looks like it's going to add value, not that it mathematically adds value, right? So something to think about there. Okay, next one. So we have a random sample of 100 students from each class at a large university. They're sent a computer message by the Division of Student Services. The message titles, important message from Student Services, and asked to acknowledge receipt. Number of hours it took the students to respond during the next 7 days was measured for each of the 4 samples. Student Services was attempting to determine how effective emailing information to students might be. Appropriate statistical analysis of difference for the 4 classes is what? Now remember those rules I gave you earlier. Okay. We have freshmen, sophomore, juniors, and seniors. So I have 4 groups in the response time, right? That's what we're measuring, is the response time. So classes and response time. So which one of these would I most likely use? Okay, so I have 1 independent variable, classes, right? The different levels of classes. That's my 1 independent variable across 4 groups, and I have 1 dependent variable. So because I have 4 groups, I can automatically get rid of t-test because t can only compare 2. Gone, right? I only have 1 thing that I'm measuring for a dependent, the response time. So I can get rid of multivariate. All right. And then there was nothing about them getting the email at different times, right? So they started out with the same like prompting event. They all had equal starting ground. So I can get rid of covariance. And that leaves me with a one-way analysis of variance, also known as a one-way ANOVA or a simple ANOVA. You see how I ruled those other ones out? Okay, using those rules. Okay, next one. So we're in graduate school. Raul found that none of the traditional counseling was to his liking. Based on his undergraduate coursework in philosophy and psychology, he developed his own personal theory of helping. In a practicum and internship, he found that some of the processes from the textbook were helpful to his theory in addressing particular client problems. Raul's theory could most accurately be called what? All right, let's take a look at this. So, keywords, none of the traditional counseling theories to his liking. So because of that, I'm going to get rid of client-centered immediately, right? Because none of these theories, and that's one of the classic theories, so I can scratch client-centered right away. He developed his own personal theory, okay? Individualistic is not a type of theory, so I can scratch that one because it's not a theory. Integrative and eclectic would probably be the 2 that I would end up with, all right? Eclectic means that I'm going to choose different tools and I'm going to try them with my clients, but I may not have an underlying understanding of what I'm choosing, when I'm choosing, and how I'm choosing it. So eclectic is, oh, I think that mindfulness might work for you today. Oh, I think that maybe you should try, Dear Man or something like that, right? Like I'm just going to pull out tools that I think could help with the immediate issue. Whereas integrative is, I have an understanding of human behavior that I am using to inform how I'm working with clients. Okay, so that's the difference between integrative and eclectic. Eclectic is I'm just choosing tools to use that might match the immediate issue, whereas integrative is choosing and having a theory of why you're using what you're using when you're using it. Make sense? Okay, go on. Oh, this one always leads to some debate. Okay. And Sammy says hi. All right, here we go. A 50-year-old African-American Vietnam vet has been assigned to a young white female counselor at the VA hospital. He's experiencing symptoms of PTSD and has been in and out of counseling for many years. During the third session with his new counselor, the client gets frustrated and angry, says, I'm not getting help here. This is just getting worse. What are you writing down about me? I want to see my records. The counselor does what? First of all, don't take notes in front of your clients. That's a very bad idea to start with. Very bad, especially if they have PTSD, trauma, whatever. You're just asking for trouble. So just a word to the wise, don't take notes with your clients. Bad idea. All right. So what should this counselor do? What do we think? What can this counselor legally do? It's hard to work with you. Oh, this one's always one that gets people stuck. What do y'all think? What are the key words here? So some of the keywords that I would highlight to help me are PTSD. Okay, it's important. So this person is struggling. This person's been in and out of counseling. So there's some emotional, probably volatility going on. Frustrated and angry. And he wants to see his records. Okay, so what can I legally do in this situation? It is not appropriate to deflect and ignore the person and focus on their anger. That's just going to piss them off. All right, it's just going to make them more angry. Right, so mark that one off. Can I ethically sanitize something I've already written? Absolutely not. Never, ever. You can amend, but you cannot change once a record's been written. All right. Can I tell the client the agency's policy is not to release? Well, if that's the policy, that's illegal, right? Because clients have to have the ability to access their records. Okay. But I can delay that disclosure until they're calmer. If I think that giving them the notes at that time will cause harm. And based on the criteria like PTSD, in and out, angry, frustrated, I would have reasonable cause to delay and to say, you need to submit a request for that. Let's talk about that. Let's set up a time to come back and talk about that. Okay. I'd like to meet with you and my, supervisor so we can talk through it together. Anything like that. Okay.
I have a question that Sarah brought up.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
She said, is that word supposed to be delay or deny? I think that's what.
Yeah, you can deny it in that moment and then delay it. So yes,
Okay. I think that's what threw me off too. I was like, okay.
But you can deny in the moment. You can deny it for up to 30 days. Alexa, it's so nice to see you. I know I owe you an appointment. Sorry, I had a sick kiddo.
No, thank you. Maybe you'll have some time later.
Yeah, we'll see. Mm-hmm. A counselor at a mental health counseling agency noticed that the clients who complained of anxiety also tended to be towards introversion. As a part of the agency's intake process, test scores were collected from all the clients on these two variables. Anxiety and introversion. And the counselor decided to examine, here's a key word I told y'all to be on the lookout for, relationship between these two variables. Statistic of choice is what? And here, I'm going to give you a really good hint. This type of correlation is very advanced and would not be expected to be understood by a minimally qualified counselor. Okay. This one. All right. So we're looking for a relationship. T-test and MANOVAs look at difference. All right. So those two I can rule out immediately. This is a pretty advanced form of correlation, so I probably would rule that one out. Pearson correlation is looking at two scaled or continuous variables. So I would choose Pearson correlation for that reason. All right, but this is about relationship. These two are about difference. Okay. Of the major counseling theories, some are more conducive to measuring effectiveness with clients than others. All may be effective as applied by some counselors with certain clients who have certain problems. In general, however, the two theoretical approaches showing the most effectiveness through research are what? So just think about which one of these have been the most researched. All right. So, person-centered would be one of the first ones I'd get rid of. This is very hard to research person-centered. It's, feel good. So that would be one of the first ones that I would get rid of. Reality therapy has been researched, Gestalt not as much. The ones that have been researched, definitely rational emotive, but not so much Adlerian. Adlerian is psychoanalytic, so it's harder to research. So that leaves me with behavioral, cognitive behavioral, and rational emotive. These have definitely been researched the most. So they have the most evidence-based support. These other ones, some of these are a little bit feel good. Okay. The humanistic ones are a little harder to research because they're about relationship and constructs that are hard to measure. So in a training session on ethics and legal issues, the trainer discusses a number of professional issues with the counselors. And at one point, the participant asked this question, or he asked the participants this question: name a professional counselor activity that does not require the passage of a state law. The trainer took responses from the audience. Jackson said involuntary commitment. Marcia said licensure. Naomi said accreditation. Phil said privileged communication. What is the correct response? So which one of these things, which person was right about it not requiring legal passage of a law? I would say that in today's version of the test, they wouldn't put these people. They would just say the 3 or 4 things, right? It wouldn't make it that difficult. Okay, so let's go through these. Involuntary commitment. You can't do that without state law, right? In order to have the ability to commit somebody, it has to be a legal provided thing. Licensure, that's done by state law. Privileged communication, the ability to hold confidential what you're saying with your client, that's state law. Accreditation is a private organization that says that a program is able to, get you trained in the way that they need you to be trained. So accreditation is private. The other 3 are legal. Go back. Oh, we'll just do that. There it goes. Okay, here we go. So a counselor's working in a juvenile group home designed an inventory of social skills which each resident takes. The purpose of this inventory is to substitute, keyword, for other ways of estimating the social skill level of residents. Since the purpose of this inventory is to substitute for other methods of measurement, the most appropriate type of validity that we're concerned with here is what? Which one of these applies? I would encourage you to review your different types of validity. I'll put some information in the folder after class that'll give you some tools to help with that. Okay, keyword is substitute. So we talked about face validity, right? That's the appearance that it should be in the package or whatever we're doing. Content validity is, does the content look, or is the content what we say we want to look at, right? So if you take the NCE, is it questions about counseling stuff, right? Concurrent means that it's similar in the validity of another instrument like it. So for example, the PHQ-9, which measures depression and suicidality, should have some concurrent validity with the DAS-21, which is also looking at depression, anxiety, and stress. So I would expect those two things would have concurrent validity. Construct validity is they're measuring the same theoretical construct. So if I were looking at Dr. Baker's school counselor self-efficacy and looking at a counselor self-efficacy model, I would expect some construct validity that they're both measuring Albert Bender's self-efficacy. Okay. So in that situation, you should have thought of concurrent, because that's what we're doing here. We're trying to find something to substitute, right? That's in the wrong place. So substitute. There it is. All right, so this is construct, whether a test measures the intended content, concurrent, and face. So concurrent would be the correct answer here. Another way you do this sometimes is you might have a test, like maybe if I'm a teacher, I might, well, I do this in my stats class. So in my stats class, you can write a proposal for a quantitative research study, or you can create a game or lesson that teaches a part of stats. Right? Those are concurrent because they're measuring the same thing. They're just measuring them in different ways. Okay. Hey, 7. Can you put her out, please? Thank you. All right. Next up, Antonio is finishing a master's degree in counseling and must complete a thesis. He decides to investigate the differences in social skills between homeless veterans and a sample of veterans who are not homeless. As he gets to the point of data collection, he realizes he'll be limited in assessing only those veterans of each group who volunteer to participate. Because of that, when it comes time for data analysis, Antonio will probably have to use what? I think this might be the last stats one. The key word here is that the veterans are homeless and they are not homeless and they would have to volunteer. So that's going to impact the type of sample that I get. All right. So this is really about the type of statistics I would need to use. So I'm going to get rid of regression because I'm not looking at predicting anything. And I'm going to get rid of factor analysis because I'm not trying to find factors of something. So it's going to leave me with these two things, non-parametric and parametric. Here's how I remember it. Parametric is like a parachute. It's like the bell-shaped curve. A parachute is round, right? So it's like a normally distributed sample. Okay. Is this a normally distributed sample? If I have a volunteer sample, is it going to be normally distributed? Christina, right. It is not a normal distributed sample. So therefore, I would use a non-normally distributed sample statistic, which would be non-parametric. Okay. So whenever you have something that's not random sampling, you kind of have to lean towards the non-parametric. Okay, next one. A counselor has set up an elaborate experimental study. I lied, there's another stats one, which includes gathering pre-test and post-test data. However, she is concerned the pre-test might influence or interact with the experimental design. To deal with this contingency, she's decided to do what? And I'm just going to talk y'all through this one. So in this particular case, she's got this pre and this post. So let's pretend like I gave you a pre-test for this course, right? And then I had you take this course. And then I had you take the post-test. Well, guess what? Chances are you learned something from the pre-test, right? The pre-test itself would be a teaching learning opportunity. So can I say that the class itself was what caused the change? No, the pre-test could have caused the change. The intervention could have caused the change. And even the post-test could have caused the change. So to control for that, we're going to use something called Solomon Foursquare, where we have one group just do the pre-test and not the course and take the post-test. Then we have one group that takes the course and the post-test. We have one group that takes the pre-test and the post-test. So you get any combination of those things, right? So you're trying to isolate the effects of the course and the pre-test. And that's what Solomon Foursquare does, is it controls for the effect of the pre-test and focuses in on the intervention. So you can compare the different groups, okay? Chi-square is a frequency. So it's looking at, did what happened match with what we expected to happen? A great example of that is voting, like an election. Like we thought this person was going to win, but they didn't, right? So that would be an example of chi-square. Regression is about prediction. And then this one, don't worry about because you wouldn't be getting that one. Don't worry about that one. That one's just looking to see if there's different ranges within a certain study. All right, next one. So a child has considerable difficulty writing words because of a physical limitation. Periodically, the teacher reinforces the child with a smile and an encouraging word. This is an example of what type of reinforcement. You have to know they will have questions on here about variable interval, variable ratio, fixed interval, and fixed ratio. So I've given you this kind of cheat sheet for that. So variable interval, it's delivered at unpredictable intervals, right? Might be 5 minutes, might be 7, might be 10, but it's variable. Whereas variable ratio, it's delivered at an unpredictable number. So after every 1 response, after every 3 responses. So the difference between interval and ratio is time and the number of incidents. Hello, sweetie. I love little ones. Wish we could take them all in. So Christina has a baby with her. It's distracting me. So fixed interval is the reinforcement is delivered at a predictable time interval. So it's always going to be every 5 minutes, always every 10 minutes, or it's going to be consistent. And fixed ratio is going to be after so many responses. So after the student says something twice, then there's going to be a response. Twice again, a response. That makes sense? So in this particular one, the teacher is reinforcing the child with a smile and encouraging word periodically, like occasionally on time. So in that case, I'm going to think variable interval, right? Variable interval because it's time. Periodically is time. Okay. I'm just going to go to this one because we can talk about them through here. All right, so career assessment and information system that replaced the dictionary of occupational titles and is developed by the Department of Labor. So you're not gonna be able to respond, but just think about what you think the answer is for this. Which one of these is what replaced the dictionary of occupational titles? Now, for those of you who did not know what the world was like before ONET, which is the answer, I did have the pleasure of working with the dictionary of occupational titles, and they were a series of books that were about this wide, and you literally had to look up occupational codes. I was a vocational rehabilitation counselor when I first started as a counselor, and whenever I did an intake or something, I would have to physically look through this book and find the code for the occupation that the person was doing and transfer some of that information over to forms. It was mind-boggling difficult, and we got a set of those dictionaries every 6 months or something like that, and then you'd end up with these huge books and didn't know what to do with them, right? And an interesting fact, counselors, clinical mental health counselors, just got in ONET. just a few years ago. We were not in there for the longest time. So we are finally officially recognized by the federal government as existing. So congratulations. School counselors have been in there for a while, but clinical mental health counselors were not for a long time. All right, so ONET. Discover is a career computer program where you can figure out what computer programs you want. This is a theory for making decisions, and this is a theorist. Again, nowadays with the test, they always have the same thing. So it would be, you know, similar answers. All right, so next one. A term that refers to communication through use of microspace is the distance we maintain or attempt to maintain. What is that? Think about that. Look at this for a second. I'm gonna get a kitty out of here. He needs to go out. My cats are not happy that I'm not here to play with them, so they're screaming. All right, so kinesthetics, I think there should be a T there, is movement. Proxemic to space, paralanguage is like the intonation, the pitch, the tone that you use, and neurolinguistics is the relationship with the brain. So in this particular case, it's going to be proxemic space. And I have seen this one on the test a few times. Like they ask you to differentiate like how you interact with the client and what that is. So knowing those different terms is helpful. Couple more. About 6 more. And then we'll take a break. So when any culture makes an effort to become part of a larger culture, this process is known as what? So which one of these terms best describes when a culture or somebody from a culture makes an effort to become part of a larger culture? What is that process known as? All right, let's see what y'all did with this one. So integration is the intermixing of people who were once segregated. So probably not in this case. Assimilation is the process of taking in or absorbing. That one sounds like it might be it. Segregation is separation from, and accommodation is the adjustment of, so adjusting to a culture. So in this effort to become a part of makes me think of assimilation. Next one. Now we're going to go in some career theory. So which of the following career theorists advocates individual differences in background, so where you come from, physical, psychological variables, and accumulated experiences over life? Which one does this represent? When you're studying, remembering names is helpful because they always ask about some names, okay? So my suggestion to you is write Hoppeck and write down a line of what his theory is about. Write down super, write down a couple of keywords that his theory is about. Borden, same thing. Ann Rowe, write down a couple of words. Start to associate them with specific words, right? You don't have to write long paragraphs, take tons and tons of notes on the theorist. You just need to know the key words, their key concepts. That's really what you need to focus in on. So, for example, in this one, Hoppeck, he decided that, okay, awareness of a job that helps meet your needs, this is what career development is all about. Like once you understand what your needs are, you can figure out what job you need, okay? Super believed in self-concept, like this idea of self-concept and self-awareness within yourself. Borden said, hey, no matter what, you got to play. If you don't enjoy your job, you're not going to stay in that job, all right? And then Ann Rose said, you're who you are today because of your experiences you had with your primary family, specifically your mom and dad. What they taught you, what you observed from them, those built up on you like Post-it notes over time, right? And define who you are today. For that reason, because I'm looking for individual differences in background, variables, and accumulated experiences, Ann Rowe is the answer. Do you see how I made these notes? And those notes help me know which theorist did what. So I don't need pages of information on each theorist. I just need key words that are associated with that theorist to remember the theorist. So don't try to memorize or, know tons of information about them. Next one. Several authors, Super, Livingston, Erickson, suggest that clients are vulnerable at a certain time, and during these times, counselors are needed more than ever. The term that refers to this point in time is what? Now, let's say that I don't know who Livingston is because he's not as popular as Super and Erickson. I do know that Super did developmental career theory, and that Super talked about how we move between these different time periods, right? And he called those career transitions. I also know about Erickson. Erickson developed the psychosocial theory, right? And he had phases, and he talked about how we had to have a crisis to have a transition from each one of those developmental psychosocial stages. So immediately I zoned in on transition just because of those two theorists, right? Mentoring is not a time. Novice phase, that's only one period of a time if it is anything. Critical juncture, it's also like there's one point, right? And here it's talking about these times, and that makes me think more of transitions, right? That there's multiple transitions. So that's how I break that one down. Next one, last one. So the last one, yes, there we go. That was it. Awesome. Okay, yes, I want to go out of that. All right. So how much fun was that? It gets better, I promise. Those are the worst parts. All right, so let's take a 10-minute break, come back together, and we will do some fun games and connect on some other things, okay? I'll see you in 10. Sarah, hopefully it got a little better sometimes. Did some of the questions get a little better?
I don't know. I mean, I'm so glad I'm doing this. That's what it's showing me.
Yeah.
I honestly didn't know any of those research questions.
Wait a minute, didn't you take research with me?
I did, but I don't remember. I remember concurrent. I remember concurrent. That's the only one I remember.
All right, well.
If it makes y'all, oh, sorry.
No, go
I
ahead.
was gonna say, if it makes y'all feel better, I'm actually a school counselor right now, and I've been in this field for 5 years, and I decided now that I want to take the NCE. So it's been a while since I've looked at any of this content, so I am stressed.
Kayla, I did the same thing you did because I was a college counselor. I didn't take the test right away, and oh my goodness, did I regret that. It was, if you're coming right out of a program or you're at the end of your program, you really are in the best shape possible, because otherwise it's a lot of relearning. So yeah, I feel empathy for you.
Yeah, I agree with that. I should have taken it right away, and I was like, well, it's more money. So I just decided not to, and that was a very bad decision.
No, I feel you. It was 5 years for me too. It was exactly 5 years. So
I'm in a similar boat, but just because it's taking me forever to get through a program.
Yeah, that's the other thing. If you do it like part-time, right? It takes, yeah. All right. So next up, we're going to do a Kahoot. We'll hopefully make you feel a little better. So let me get that set up because I had it up and I don't know where it went. Oh, there it is. Okay. And which, let's see, we are doing, we're going to start with professional orientation. Okay, so open up your Kahoot apps and okay, this is new. This is not They changed Kahoot on me. Okay, here we go. So the PIN, you can either scan the QR code or you can enter the PIN. It's 778-2436. And I encourage fun names. So fun names, you can, whatever, but game PIN is 778-2436. If anybody hasn't played Kahoot before, what's going to happen is a question is going to come up on my screen and there will be answers that are associated with shapes and colors, and you have to choose the shape and color on your phone that corresponds with the right answer. You get more points the faster you go, but it's really just to have fun and to review. So don't let it stress you out.
Remind me how to get on. I'm on the Kahoot app. Where do I go?
So it should be on your phone, Alexa, because you played it with me before.
Yeah, it's on my phone, but what
And
do
then
I
there
go?
should be a place where it says as a student or enter the PIN.
Mm. Create course.
Do you see it?
No. Show more. Oh, I see it.
Okay.
Okay.
Stress penguin. That's my favorite so far. I love the stress penguin. Test anxiety forever. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. If you haven't gotten into the PIN will stay on the screen and you should be able to join us. And let's have some fun. Reminder, if you're playing this in your Kahoot app, you'll be able to come back in and play these games again so that you can use them as reviews. All right, so here we go. I'll turn off the music because I hate the music. All right, first one. Which group has been the most instrumental in opposing counselor licensure? So opposing counselor licensure, which group? All over the place. It's actually psychologists. They feel the most threatened by us. So psychologists have actively opposed counselor licensure through every state, just about. All right. Sarah can do it, followed by eyes hates. I hate stats. I love it. Okay, I hate stats. That's awesome. All right. Got it. All right, next one. The first state to offer licensure to counselors was which state? It was in 1976. Virginia, my home state. I live in the Commonwealth. So Virginia was the first state to offer licensure. Anybody know what the last state was to offer licensure? During chat, you can say it out loud if you know. Anybody? California. California was the last state. All right. I hate stats is in the lead, followed by Bob. The American Counseling Association was originally named what? What was the original name of the American Counseling Association? Like a little history lesson in your professional organizations. American Personnel and Guidance Association. Because remember, our roots are in school counseling and vocational counseling. Those are our roots. All right. I hate stats is staying in the lead. When working with an 8-year-old child in a non-school setting, it is commonly necessary to obtain what? What do you have to obtain? Remember, national test. This is not about state laws or your district rules. This is about, in general, what should we be trying to get? So the answer is assent from the child and consent from the parents. Now, I know that in a lot of school districts, it's an opt-out process, but you can't think about it from a district level. You have to think about it from a national level and an ethical level. What are we really, should we try to get? Assent from the child and consent from the parents. Okay. I was a school counselor. I know that's not how it really works, but Bob and Mel are in the lead. The final section of the ACA Code Ethics deals with what? What is that last section? Section I. What is it dealing with? I always thought they should put this one first, not last, but I don't get to say so. It is resolving ethical issues and how to work with each other as professionals. That's section I. Ooh, Emma's taking over the lead. Is it over yet? Second. When a client discloses that she has been a victim of elder abuse, counselors should do what? Again, national thinking here, ethical thinking. Okay, the answer is mandated to report to law enforcement. Some states now even have elder abuse trainings that you have to take in order to be licensed and maintain your licensure. So always check what their training requirements are in your state. But as a national test, we should refer to reporting to law enforcement. Emma's on fire, followed by Bob and Mel. The BCTMH certifies what type of counselor? So you need to know your acronyms, especially your NBCC acronyms. They love to throw those acronyms on the test and not tell you what they are. So make sure you look at all of the acronyms for the credentials for NBCC. It is a telemental health provider. It's a board certified telemental health provider. Emma's holding on the lead, followed by I Hate Stats. The mental health practitioners who most commonly administer psychological testing are what type of professional? So which group tends to do most of the testing? And in some states are the only ones allowed to do testing. So I know we have people here from Illinois, from Virginia and North Carolina. You are all allowed to do some form of assessment. You just have to prove training. But there are some states where counselors are prohibited from doing assessment because of the lobby that psychologists had against us, because psychologists really wanted to keep a hold on that particular part of the practice. They make a lot of money off of assessments. So there's a financial reason why they wanted to keep that benefit exclusively to themselves. Okay, Emma's holding on to the lead. Shauna, a college sophomore, would like support with her inability to focus in class. Who should she work with? What type of counselor would be best for her to work with? There are lots of different types of counselors, and knowing what each one does is really helpful on the test. College counselor. That was one of my favorite jobs. Loved being a college counselor. I was counselor at Meredith for a long time. By license, what profession can prescribe medication to their clients? Hopefully y'all can get this one pretty quick. Oh, look at those answers. Super fast. Now, psychologists are trying to petition for the right to prescribe meds in lots of places. That's some of the current legal battles. So you might see a question on the test that said, which group of professions is petitioning for the right to prescribe meds? And psychologists would be the answer then. But currently, psychiatrists are the ones who can prescribe meds. Got 3 of you holding on to the lead. The newest organizational affiliate of the American Counseling Association is what group? So which association is the most recently admitted to the ACA? It's my second favorite group. I'm president of ACC, so that's my first. But my second favorite is the Association of Counseling, Sexology, and Sex Wellness. That's one of my areas especially. Love it. And they were just admitted as an organizational affiliate. The most recent division that was added, I don't think I have a question on that, but I'll go ahead and tell you. The most recently admitted division is the trauma group, the International Association for Trauma Recovery. That's the newest division. Trying your best has moved up. NECA and NCDA are both professional associations devoted to which specialty? So it's a good idea to look at a list of the divisions on the ACA website and to familiarize yourself with those acronyms, because again, they love to use the acronyms and not tell you what the acronym means on the test, because that's part of the test is, do you know what the acronyms mean? So learning all the divisions, you don't need to know like when they were admitted, except for maybe the last affiliate and the last division. So the way it works with ACA is you petition to be like an interest group. And then once you're an interest group, you can petition to be an organizational affiliate. And then once you're an organizational affiliate and you meet certain requirements, you can petition to become a division. And once a division, you're in, right? And so your group is represented on the governing council and as part of ACA. So in this one, it's career counseling. So both of these were actually some of the first divisions of ACA. I'll try my best has moved up. What professional organization fosters scholarship and excellence in counseling profession? Hopefully, many of you are a member of this. And you may know that we do this training as a service for you through CSI, and that all the money that they earn through this is used, I think, Annabelle, is it all of it used for the scholarship?
Damaris, do you know? I don't know if Damaris can hear us, but I believe so.
And not a majority of it is used.
I can hear. So sorry. I had to clean up my puppy's mess. I have an 8-month-old puppy and had to step away. Yes. And what was your question?
About the funds for this fundraiser that CSI does, how it's used with the scholarship.
The funds for this? Yes. Well, we actually have funds aside already for the scholarship. That was from previous workshops that's happened. But what we're trying to do is kind of continue this every year. So that way we can still support the scholarship for students who are interested in attending conferences for their professional development. But as of right now, I think the due date for that scholarship is March 1st.
For NC State students.
For NC State students. So for folks in the space, if you haven't applied, please do. Because it's, it's free money and it's an opportunity to go to one of those conferences to get some more training. Particularly, I think ACA is coming up.
Yeah, and it's in Canada this year, so it's expensive. It's expensive to get there. So, and I went to my first ACA conference as the CSI president, and the CSI chapter helped me fund that trip the first time that I went in the early 2000s. So it's a real great opportunity. So I've worked with CSI throughout most of my career, and either as I was the president of the state group, then I did some task work group with the CSI on technology and counseling. And then I was a faculty advisor for a couple of chapters. So it's a really good way to get involved and stay involved, but they really, push for people to practice excellence within counseling and get engaged scholarly and professionally. So great organization to get involved in.
Yes, and I also will add into that if part of your membership too, you do have access to the journals as well. And I found that so helpful for my dissertation, or I'm not there, y'all. I'm not there yet, y'all, but I'm starting to collect research and articles that I can only find through CSI that I can't access anywhere else. So that has been absolutely useful. And I'm part of the CSI Leadership Fellowship. And that has been such an enriching experiences because I've been able to network with students from different graduate programs, got connected with faculty to do potential research or getting connected with jobs. But most importantly, just being able to support other scholars in their work and other leaders who are doing really, really meaningful work in their clinical populations and their communities. So it's just a really good way to give back to the community if that is something that you value. And so be on the lookout for like open opportunities in the future through the CSI website and your email. They send out so many great webinars and resources that you can have access to as a member.
Yeah. And something historically a lot of people don't realize is ACA was the hub that started a lot of these different organizations. So NBCC, KCREP, CSI, they all had connections to ACA when they started. So everything kind of grew out of ACA in some way, either formally or informally. So they're very strong connections. In fact, the leaders of all those organizations get together and talk about things and really try to work to make sure that whatever we're doing as a counseling profession, we've got a focused vision on it, right? That we're focused on it and we're really putting our efforts towards the same things. Like right now, one of the biggest efforts, which you will probably see on the exam, is the counseling compact, right? So understanding the counseling compact and how we're trying to get cross-state licensure abilities so that we can work more in a portable way across state lines. Right now, I have to maintain 2 licenses. I maintain my license in North Carolina and my license in Virginia. But I have a client that's thinking about moving to Colorado and Texas who doesn't want to lose me as a counselor, which means I'll have to get licensed in one of those states if my state's not a counseling compact and the state they're going to is not a counseling compact state. So it's something that you really want to take some time. I would encourage you to go to the Counseling Compact website and just familiarize yourself with it, because that will probably be on the test. Okay. All right, next up, a counselor who receives both a subpoena and a court order must do what? So again, you have to think about this at a national level. So it would be provide the court with the appropriate information or be held in contempt. Now, I'll tell you, there's been a couple of things that I have fought the courts on. I had one court judge who asked for my complete counseling file. And because ACA has the minimal necessary rule that we're supposed to do minimal necessary disclosure, I was able to fight that order. And I was able to, work with the judge to identify exactly what they wanted from that court or from that file and not give my whole file just blanket, right? Because I had an ethical duty. And that judge was in North Carolina. It was kind of funny. He was like, well, that's your code of ethics. That's not law. I said, actually, in North Carolina, ACA code of ethics has been codified. So therefore it is law. And he was like, I think a little bit put off and maybe a little impressed that I knew that. So, I was able to use the ACA to fight that court order, but you have to get legal advice. You have to notify your liability insurance. You have to follow the process of ethical decision-making when you get these court orders and things like that. A subpoena from just the attorney, you really should question, because you really need the court order from the judge to support the subpoena. So it needs to be really kind of backed up by a judge and not just an attorney asking for things. So always double check and triple check before you release information. I recommend having an attorney on retainer in addition to your liability, especially if you're in private practice. I have had the same attorney now for almost 20 years and I love it. He knows me, I know him, it's great. Slander is which of the following? So what is slander? Hey, the intentional spreading of falsehoods through spoken word. That's how I remember it. Spoken word and slander. They both start with S. Spoken word and slander. Okay. An ethical principle that encourages counselors to actively promote the welfare of clients is known as what? So think of your ethical principles. There's 5 from Kitchener. And it is beneficence. So no, you want to review all 5 of those. It's non-malfeasance, beneficence, justice, autonomy, and fidelity. And they're in the preamble of the ACA Code of Ethics, and they have what each one of them means and how they apply. With the ACA Code of Ethics, you are not just responsible for the things that have letters and numbers, the actual standards. You are also responsible to the intros to each section and the preamble. So all those things you're held accountable for. So make sure you read the whole code and not just the standards, okay? I hate stats and Sarah holding on to the lead, followed by ABC. When counselors are unable to use encryption software during telehealth, what are they ethically required to do? This is my thing. I love telehealth. This is my thing. I love it. Yes, we have to refrain from providing services until we can have a secure process due to HIPAA. So again, some states actually have stronger privacy laws than HIPAA, like the state of Florida. But when you're taking this test, it's a national test. So think about federal laws. Okay, so HIPAA, high tech, you know, all of those, Affordable Care Act. Those are the laws that you'll be tested on and need to know. Americans with Disabilities Act, FERPA. What must every counselor have in their counseling toolbox? I kind of have to laugh about the 4.0. I like to remind students all the time, I have never had a client ask me what my GPA was in my bachelor's or my master's or my PhD. You don't need a 4.0 in order to be a great counselor. Okay. I know it's hard to let go of that sometimes, but it's really not an essential part of your toolbox. An ethical decision-making model, however, is. If you don't have one, get one. I will tell you that most of the people who got fined or found in contempt or had charges held up against them in the ethical board and the licensure, it was because they did not have an ethical decision-making model. If you don't have one in your toolbox, get one today. It doesn't matter which one you choose, but have one today. And the second you think something might go wrong, you need to write up that ethical decision-making model about the situation and have that in your notes. Do not delay. It will hurt you. If you have a funny situation with a client or something weird happens with the client, write it up. Don't wait, because you'll remember more when it's in the moment than if it's 6 months down the line when they file a complaint against you. Okay. And the second you think something might happen, call your liability insurance. This isn't like your homeowners. It's not something that you're going to get penalized for calling them. You need to call them. You need to get their support and their help. Okay. And here's the one that makes people a little nervous. If you're a school counselor or you work for an agency and you're relying on the liability insurance they have on you, you're going to get hurt. Because I promise you, if they can scapegoat you if a situation happens, they will. So I don't care who you are, you always have your own personal liability insurance when you're a counselor. No matter what setting you're in, it is worth its weight in gold. I just had a friend in Wilmington who was falsely acclaimed to something, was found not to be, the charge was dropped, but it took 14 months to get through the process. And the total case cost her over $16,000. Now, she was just defending her innocence and it was $16,000. Thankfully, she had liability insurance and that was covered through the liability insurance. But I don't know about you guys. I don't have $16,000 in my checking account to defend myself. So make sure you have your liability insurance no matter what setting you're in. And for those of you who may say be having children and things like that and think, oh, I don't need my liability this year, I'll just renew it next year. Bad idea. For every time you drop your liability insurance or you don't renew it on time, your risk factor increases. And after 3 risk factor increases, some insurances will not insure you anymore. Okay, so this is something you maintain. I remember one year I was so poor, I ate Cheerios so I could pay my liability insurance. I just lived off cereal, right? Because I had to pay my liability insurance. That was priority. So you have to make those decisions. So that's my soapbox moment. I hope you hear me on that because I don't want to see you get hurt. So protect yourself.
I
Okay.
have a question. Because like I said, I'm already a school counselor. Like the ASCA, I feel like I read somewhere that ASCA also, like when you're a member, you get liability insurance through them as well, right?
You know, I don't remember if ASCA does it for professionals. I know that ACA and ASCA do it for students. So just check it out.
Yeah.
So some of them it's just students. And so the other thing that I've seen people do is you've got to really disclose to your professional liability insurance if you're working in multiple settings. For the longest time, I was a school counselor at an alternative school, K-12 alternative school. I don't know how kids get into alternative school as kindergartners. That still bewilders me, even after working there. All right, so they're in an alternative school. So I'm working in that setting and I had a private practice. I had to buy a rider on top of my normal liability insurance to cover both settings, because most insurances only cover one setting. So you might have to buy a little extra to cover if you're in multiple settings, like if you're working across settings. So just something to think about. Okay. All right. So that was my soapbox moment about liability insurance. All right. So our winners for today, this first one, trying my best, is number 3. ABC is number 2. And number 1 is I hate stats. And 4th and 5th is Sarah and Nadia. Congratulations. Yay. All right. So again, you can play these over and over and over to help you, learn things. So take advantage of that. All right. So that is that one. Let's see what we're supposed to do next. Our next thing is ethics, which is going to probably lead us up to lunch. We might get to the social cultural. All right. So you need an American Counseling Association Code of Ethics, and somebody in your group is going to need an NBC Code of Ethics. All right. So you're going to want to have at least one person working off one and one working off the other. I'm going to put you in groups, and you're going to work on the ethical quiz, which is in the folder that I gave you guys. So it is right here, ethics quiz for the 2014 version. I'm going to copy the link in case anybody needs it real quick, put it in the chat for you. Yes. Yes. And Sherry, you asked about the recording. Yes, I did forget to record the first 10 minutes. I apologize, but the rest of it has been recorded, I think. Am I recording right now? Let's make sure I turned it on. I did. Okay, so we're still recording. All right, so I just put that link in there. That is for the ethics quiz. It's a true false for the most part, except for the last question. So what you're going to need to do is determine, is it true or false? And then at least one ethical standard to support why it's the answer that you're giving me. Okay, so true or false, and what's the ethical standard? Going to give you about 30 minutes or so to work on it. I'm going to bounce around